Good morning, boys and girls. How are you today? It was a glorious Memorial Day weekend. Yesterday afternoon, though, lots of hail, big, huge, like ice cubes coming down from the sky. It's kind of crazy. Anyways, today I'm going to read chapter 9 of The Giant Goof-up by Sarah Courtauld, in which there were thwomp sounds. Oh, said Eliza. She should have said something dramatic like jacow or by the great gizzards of Trimpletroop. But she hadn't heard of the great gizzards of Trimpletroop, so she couldn't say that. And jacow isn't even a word, so she couldn't say that either. So she simply said, oh. The last jolt of the house had sent Lavender tumbling towards her sister. Now they were both standing in the doorway, looking up. It's a giant, said Lavender. It was indeed a giant. This giant. By the light of the moon, they could see his great, grim face, his huge, bristling eyebrows, and his massive jaw, his wild hair that tumbled down to great, broad shoulders, his massive arms that were thicker than tree trunks and looked considerably less friendly. The giant was holding their house in his hands as he stomped through the fields and forests of Squirb. Wherever he was taking them, it seemed like he was in a hurry. While Eliza stared totally speechless, Lavender beamed. I always wanted to move, she said. As the giant took another great thunking step forward, Eliza slammed the front door shut. Bonnet, she said as the house tilted again. You weren't expecting a visitor, were you? Why, said Bonnet. Well, our house is being stolen by a giant. A pirate, said Bonnet. A giant, said Eliza. A pastry chef, said Bonnet. A giant, shouted Eliza. Our house is being stolen by a giant. Bonnet was really hoping that he had heard Eliza wrong. Despite being technically a giant himself, Bonnet was so scared of giants that he didn't even include them in his list of fears or worries. It had only been through a series of lucky accidents that Bonnet had ended up in the human world. When he did, he had made a firm decision never, ever to think about giants again. As the room heeled to the right, Eliza and Lavender slid to the far wall, landing in a pile of pots and pans. It's hard to think when you're covered in saucepans, and Eliza made a mental note to try and avoid it in the future. How can we stop him, Bonnet? Yelled Eliza. Aren't you the giant expert? But Bonnet really wasn't in a state to answer her. He would have liked to have given Eliza some really useful giant advice. Unfortunately, he was unable to, as at that moment, he did the bravest thing that he could think of. He fainted. The giant stomped on through the countryside, their house cradled in his hands. Thwomp, thwomp, thwomp. While Lavender beamed and Eliza panicked and Bonnet lay unconscious on the floor. Gertrude stood perfectly balanced on the back of a chair. For the first time in a long time, Gertrude had a smile on her face. She even did a little dance. Look at Gertrude on the back of that chair. Of course, Gertrude knew that she was superior to humans in every way, but it was nice to have it demonstrated so clearly. We have to do something, Eliza said once she had untangled herself from the pots and pans. She scrambled over to the door, leaned out, and shouted upward. Hey, you! What do you think you're doing? The giant took no notice of her. Hey, she shouted, put us down, you massive meanie. Then she took aim with her bow and arrow. Stop, or I'll shoot. When the giant took no notice, Eliza aimed and fired. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. One arrow flew past the giant's face. The second pierced his ear and just hung there like a jaunty earring. The third flew up his nose and disappeared. But he completely ignored her. So Eliza ducked back into the room, grabbed all the pots and pans she could, and flung the door open again. Could you stop stealing our house, please? Eliza yelled. She hurled all the pots and pans at the giant, which did finally get his attention. He looked down and saw Eliza and chuckled. There you are, he boomed, lifting the house up so he could get a good look at her. He smiled. Hello, teeny tiny. My name is Too Big. And you are? I'm Eliza, said Eliza, suddenly very, very scared. You're not Eliza, said Too Big with a grin. You are mine. Now, back you go into your teeny tiny house. Eliza gasped as he reached forward and picked her up between finger and thumb, took a good look at her, then put her back into the house down on the chimney. Thwomp, thwomp, thwomp. Too Big strode onward. Inside the house, Eliza lay dazed in the fireplace. Something had happened. Something had, involving her home. But as she couldn't quite remember what it was. Had Lavender started filling their bedroom with frogs because she was trying to find the frog prince again? Or had she cut the legs of off all the chairs so their house would be more like the dwarf's cottage in Snow White? Then Lavender shrieked, and Eliza was suddenly awake. Oh, the beanstalk! We're going up the beanstalk. Isn't that exciting? What a beautiful morning, said Lavender, clapping her hands. As Eliza dragged herself from the fireplace and looked out the window, she saw that, unfortunately, her sister appeared to be right. It was a beautiful morning. The sun had risen and was now shining down on the realm of Squirb, which was slipping farther and farther away from them with every passing moment. It was also shining down on Too Big, the giant, as he climbed an enormous beanstalk that reached up into the clouds. Tomorrow I will read chapter 10, in which there are good manners, and there's the beanstalk. Have a super day. Today is going to be extremely hot, so make sure you drink lots of water. Everybody smile. See you tomorrow.